If you've spent the last few evenings scrolling through endless listings, comparing oven sizes, control panels, and price tags, and you still can't shake the feeling that you might end up with the wrong piece of equipment for your kitchen, this review is here to clear that up. I've been talking to a handful of bakery owners, a couple of small-scale catering operations, and a few CAF managers who all faced the same dilemma. They needed a reliable convection oven that could handle a decent batch size without breaking the bank. Yet they weren't sure whether to go with a heavy-duty commercial unit or settle for a smaller countertop model. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Let's walk through what the Blodgett Mark V200 SGL actually brings to the table, and why it might be the answer for some, but definitely not for everyone. First, picture the typical day in a neighborhood bakery that does both morning pastries and an afternoon lunch line. The oven they use has to shift from a 30-minute bake of croissants to a 15-minute roast of a batch of small loaves, all while keeping a consistent temperature. The Mark V200 is a single-deck, deep-size convection oven with a 5-pan capacity, which translates to roughly the volume you'd need to bake a full sheet pan of cookies and a couple of smaller trays of muffins at the same time. The porcelain interior does a solid job of reflecting heat evenly, which is why Blodgett has been a staple in professional kitchens for decades. In practice, that means you can set the digital control to 350F, load a pan of scones and a pan of biscotti, and come back to a uniformly browned product without having to rotate trays midway. For a bakery that needs to keep the line moving, that consistency saves both time and the occasional costly batch that ends up uneven. Now, who actually benefits from this configuration? If you run a bakery, a coffee shop that offers a rotating selection of baked goods, or a small catering service that needs to produce medium-sized trays of appetizers or desserts, the Mark V200 fits like a glove. Its 208V 3-phase power requirement is standard for most commercial kitchen setups, so you won't be stuck hunting for a special outlet. The digital controls are straightforward. You set the temperature, timer, and fan speed, and the oven does the rest. For operators who prefer a hands-free approach during a busy service, that simplicity cuts down on the mental load. It also means training new staff is quick. Most people can learn the basic functions in under 10 minutes. On the flip side, if you're a home chef who wants a backup oven for holiday feasts, or you run a microcaf with limited floor space, the Mark V200 might feel like overkill. The unit's footprint is roughly the size of a standard commercial range, and the weight alone makes it a two-person job to get it in place. The 3-phase electrical demand also means you'd need to upgrade your existing wiring if you're not already set up for it, which can add a significant hidden cost. In my conversations with a couple of small-scale operators, they mentioned that the initial investment, both the purchase price and the installation, was a hurdle they only cleared after confirming that the oven would be used multiple times a day, 6 days a week. If your operation runs a few times a week or you're still figuring out your menu, that kind of commitment can be a risk. Let's talk about the practical strengths that really show up after the first week of use. The first thing most users notice is how the fan-assisted convection spreads heat. In a test run at a local donut shop, a batch of glazed crullers came out with a perfectly crisp exterior while staying soft inside, even though the shop was cranking out 3 dozen per hour. The porcelain interior also makes cleanup easier. Because the surface isn't prone to staining, you can wipe down the oven after a messy batch of caramel-topped pastries without scrubbing for ages. The digital interface is not just a gimmick, it actually logs the last temperature and timer settings, which is handy when you're juggling multiple recipes and need to replicate a successful bake later. But there are a few practical downsides you need to keep in mind. The oven's single deck means you can't layer trays on top of each other, which some larger commercial ovens allow. If you need to bake 10 trays simultaneously, you'd have to run 2 cycles or invest in a second unit, which eats into kitchen real estate and budget. The fan can be a bit noisy at higher speeds. In an open-concept CAF the sound is noticeable, though it never rises to a level that disrupts conversation. Lastly, the digital controls, while simple, lack the granular programmability of higher-end models that let you set custom heat-up curves or integrate with a kitchen's central automation system. If you're looking for a fully networked oven that talks to a POS system, the Mark V200 stays in the analog corner of the market. So, who should walk away?